Good news for gamers. I like that.
I've actually got some good news. Live service games are now in a bit of trouble, and we can prove it because Sony's crown jewel developer Naughty Dog have cancelled their live service title before it enters its 10th year of development, and explicitly they're framing this as
Wait, what? 10th year of development? I have heard about this situation a lot. I have covered it a lot, by the way. This is the first time I hear that it's the 10th year of development. This changes completely everything. This is crazy. You think if something's in development for that long, at this point, you just release it to milk the money that it can milk, even if it's honestly bad. So, giving up on something that you have worked on for 10 years? Ouch. That's crazy.
as a choice between making great single-player games or churning out a live service title. This is fascinating. It's an admission that we've not seen to date from a developer this well-known and powerful in the industry, and maybe it could mean there'll be a genuine sea change happening in devs and publishers with how they think. This is not just prominent first-party developers for the biggest player in the console space rejecting a live service, but it's them doing so publicly, loudly, and instead actively choosing single-player games. Yet within this...
Yeah, no, that does not seem right. That does not seem right at all. Whatever their reason was to abandon a live service game, the thing that supposedly prints money for everyone, they're obviously going to try and handle the PR as best as possibly they could, aka say, oh, gamers, we know you don't like live service games because they're mostly predatory and pay to win and whatnot, but here, we're gonna forsake our live service game and concentrate on those good single-player games. Like The Last of Us Part 3, She-Hulk Returns. Yeah, you like that, don't you? Don't you? Don't you? Yeah. So, that is an overly rosy way of actually looking at this situation. It's just PR. Oh! Forsake the bad, concentrate on the good. I mean, it seemingly works if Bellier is saying that's a good thing.
Is an admission that a multiplayer game can't just go out, be released, and be fun. That is not allowed anymore. And as much as that sucks, ultimately, this is good news. Naughty Dog have illuminated a path, one the rest of the industry can follow, and one that leads us straight to today's sponsor. Boot.dev, they're literally some of us. Their founders watch this very channel. And,
this
of course,
so
code
cool.
Bellier News gets you a 25% discount. Being in development in May. Of course, at the very end of May, there was a report from Bloomberg suggesting that this was a very troubled project, that the team were being downsized after a milestone review. If you're not aware of how those work in game publishing, be it monthly, be it every 2 months, you'll have a milestone review, which is basically where your game, whatever build you have, you send that off, it gets reviewed, everyone kind of crosses their fingers, hopes.
I have heard about this. If you fail, you don't get any money. Well, not any money. You don't get the money you wanted. They cut down your funding. I have heard about this. But every month or every 2 months? I thought that thing happens like every half a year or something like that. Wow.
Nothing breaks, and then you find out. Usually it is, have you got a conditional pass? Have you got a pass? Or is it a fail? And if it's a fail, yeah, good luck unlocking money.
Yeah, conditional passes are, they demand that you change something now, okay? That there are demands that must be met. Otherwise, yeah, you don't get money. Interesting.
Now, obviously, this is a first-party studio, so it's not exactly like that, but still, these things truly do matter. Now, following this news that it was being reevaluated, in October, a report from Kotaku suggested the game was on ice, and that they had laid off around 25 developers in contracted positions for it. And now, as the year crawls to an end, Naughty Dog have admitted, nearly 7 months after the initial reporting, that this is a dead project. And what's meaningful to me is the way this was communicated and what that means. What kind of lies in between the lines? Because what's notable about this isn't that a game was cancelled or that Naughty Dog is walking away from the live service commitment that every Sony studio seemingly had to adhere to. It is that we haven't learned this from a Sony financial statement. We haven't learned about this from a Last of Us Part 3 announcement. Because...
Well, they're obviously not going away from this. And again, the fact that it's not on some kind of Sony's financials end of the year statement or quarterly whatever doesn't mean anything. Again, all companies will just try to do the best PR, and if Naughty Dog is known for single player games, well then they obviously abandoned it for the betterment of the gamer. What else in these situations, right? But they're not walking away from live services. There's no way. Live services are still money printing machines in the eyes of absolutely everyone. And, well, it's true. Because the concept of a live service is relatively simple. A game that constantly gets updated with more stuff. So people keep on playing it, and the way that they make money is through microtransactions. And in a lot of cases, the problems lie here that a lot of these situations, there's something pay to win, or there's something absolutely outrageous. For example, currently, 3 best examples of live service games are probably World of Warcraft, Lost Ark, and Destiny 2. Destiny 2 is getting milked out of its mind for every nickel and dime currently. We know that, and that's been real for a long time. And it's all thanks to the fact that, well, actually, let's finish Lost Ark and World of Warcraft also. Lost Ark has pay-to-win mechanics, blatantly pay-to-win mechanics. Admittedly, the game is so good that you don't need to pay-to-win if you want to be on the top level. And World of Warcraft doesn't have pay-to-win mechanics, but it also tries almost as hard as Destiny to just nickel and dime everyone for anything that they have. Hearthstone packs are, well, you have a better chance to, get a down mortgage for your house than buying all of the Hearthstone packs so you can play the game currently, and stuff like that. Now, the problem with live service games is that not only they do that, but it's also a huge problem for the players. For example, why do people stop playing live service games? What happens when people stop playing live service games? Well, the big thing that happens is one of the biggest problems with live service is the fact that the moment someone stops playing them, they fall behind. And they don't want to start playing again because they have the feeling of falling behind. And that is a big thing. The moment you start playing a live service game, on average, the moment a person stops playing it, even for a week, they probably have left it for good. And then you need things like server reboots, fresh servers, and things like that, which we already, by the way, see in World of Warcraft, Lost Ark. Pretty sure that doesn't happen in Destiny, but, minor differences, I guess, in that case. And we see things like that. The second is these live service games have way more problems than just that. The people who play them, if you don't play them actively, considering they're just content mills that create new stuff, they obviously have catch-up mechanics. And we all know about catch-up mechanics, don't we? Catch-up mechanics suck. If you are, because this is the problem that not a lot of people talk, but it is created. Admittedly, this is not created for the majority of players, but this is created for a pretty good chunk of players. So if this does not affect you, then that's fine, but it does affect a lot of people. And that is the fact that catch-up mechanics are absolutely just awful. Especially in World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is the shining jewel of horrible catch-up mechanics. For a lot of people who do not play World of Warcraft at the most efficient level possible, aka raid every single week, do all of the things to get maximum rewards, currencies, dailies, and whatnot, for those people, if they do a raid like once in 2 weeks or 3, for them, it literally becomes a situation, wait a minute, after a month, there's going to be a catch-up mechanic. And this catch-up mechanic completely makes the raids that I'm currently doing irrelevant because it's going to boost my power level above them and it's going to take 5 minutes to do. It makes this interesting situation where you don't... If you play the game, you feel like an idiot because the catch-up mechanics are so strong. Again, live service games are riddled with problem. problems. And the biggest developer problem of live service games is what we see happening to Destiny. The moment you miss too hard with a live service game that is already on of the profitability margins or whatnot, you're not making enough money. You need to nickel and dime your player base a lot. Destiny 2 has done it because Destiny has released bad expansions. A lot of bad expansions, in fact. And the player base has shrunk because of that. Because the moment a live service also has a bad expansion and people don't like what's going on, they just leave. They just leave. And again, when you leave a live service game, you're maybe not coming back unless it's a new expansion or something. You're definitely not coming back midway in the expansion. Again, some people do, but typically most people don't. So, yeah, that's a huge thing. That's a huge blow. So the people that are left in Destiny need to be nickeled and dimed as hard as humanly possible. Otherwise, well, Bungie's missing all the revenue goals. And that's bad. That's bad. That is the risk with live service games. They can print money, but if you miss and if it's bad, you're just an endless burning pit of money.
In a way, both of those would have been the PR play to help to cushion the blow of some bad news. But instead, Naughty Dog have just thrown the entire concept of live service games down to take the fall. Their statement actually matters here. They think that public perception has shifted to the point where they can happily scapegoat the genre in favor of making single-player games. And here's from their statement. I'm just going to kind of read out for you the important parts. We've made the incredibly difficult decision to stop development on that game. The multiplayer team has been in pre-production since we were working on Last of Us Part 2. Crafting experience we felt was unique and had tremendous potential. In ramping up to full production, the massive scope of our ambition became clear.
Really, the crafting experience of The Last of Us Part 2 has extreme potential? I don't know about that one, Chief.
Clear. To release and support Last of Us Online, we'd have to put all of our studio resources behind supporting post-launch content for years to come, severely impacting development of future single-player games. Almost in a way, not wanting to be so, I don't know, caught up in their own version of GTA Online that they just don't get to make any more GTA. Obviously, GTA 6 is happening, but I think you understand my analogy anyway. That's how a lot of people who love GTA but don't necessarily love GTA Online had ended up feeling. So, we had two paths in front of us. Become solely a live service game studio or continue to focus on single-player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage. They end by saying, we have more than one ambitious brand new single-player game that we're working on here at Naughty Dog. So, there's two things to take away from this statement.
Please be at the backstory of She-Hulk from The Last of Us. That will be great. I'm sure everyone will love that.
Number one, right? Live service development scope means that there is no middle ground here. That basically it's an all or nothing situation. Now, second point is that they're now willing to tell audiences that as a press beat because they know that live service is turning into a dirty word and the players have basically turned against loads of what the industry is.
Live service has always been a dirty word.
Is actively wanting to put out there. So, to get into the scope of live service demand then, as a bit of a reminder here, when Naughty Dog were developing The Last of Us Part 2, 2,000 plus people worked in that game, and that includes outsourcing teams across 14 studios who handle specialist elements, things like voice acting and sound design. Now, in Kotaku's reporting, they suggested the internal headcount pre-layoffs was 400 people. There is no way the Naughty Dog did not know how much work a live service multiplayer game would be. And even if you're to assume that this entire live service imposition is something from Sony, who, remember, recently halved the number of live service games they expect to have released by fiscal year 2025 from 12 to 6, there's basically no way the team at Naughty Dog didn't know how much work it would be to build and then run a full live service. And the thing is, you kind of need way more than 400 people when a game is at this big AAA scale.
Honestly, that's also a smart move from Sony because they most likely understand, wait a minute. We're kind of fighting over the same people in all these different live services. That's not financially viable. Because if you have 100 people, imagine your crowd of players is 100 people. And all of those 100 people play your games. It's kind of stupid to split this crowd up in two different developments. Two different live service games if you can just leave one. Yeah, that's way smarter, way better. because then that one is more quality and all of that good stuff.
And that may sound just madness, but I mean, think about it. Bungie have split themselves between unannounced projects, marathon development, and just Destiny 2. And that's kind of ran aground. You look at the World of Warcraft development team, it's 600 plus people. The Diablo team, I believe, is actually decent.
And then you look at Starfield's 250 developers that added an FOV slider in 2 months. Man, quality.
Decently larger than that. So you've got here teams that are, and that's not, I would assume, including other parts of the company that exist to service that team. So loads of these live service games have larger teams than the entirety of the company of Naughty Dog. So whenever they say that they don't think they can do them both, I do actually believe them on that. I mean, of course, if you're to assume that it's absolutely non-negotiable that all of their single-player narrative games are, you know, pushing the industry forward, pushing the craft forward in what they're able to achieve. I would snarkily add, in a technical sense, not in a writing sense, because I think that kind of went backwards recently. Now, based on the statement they made, we can probably assume that the multiplayer team who built The Last of Us Factions, which was, you know, the thing in The Last of Us Part 1, that actually was so surprisingly good that people wanted it to be a full experience, that basically they've been working on that during the production of The Last of Us Part 2. Now, that is a game that has started development in 2014, meaning that's almost 9 years. Their ambition to have the sequel to The Last of Us Factions has been in development for a decade, pretty much. That's kind of crazy. So with that being in production, and then Sony wanting to push more into live services, we can all see how that was spun out into being its own product. And we've seen this from other companies as well. I mean, it's cancelled now, but do you remember the Cyberpunk multiplayer standalone thing that they were going to do? And
no, not at all, actually.
And they said would be its own thing. And then, of course, they ended up cancelling. Does seem that that pursuit for the
a multiplayer Cyberpunk experience where there's like, it's like GTA Online where there's 100 people in the city. I mean, honestly, that sounds pretty lit, not gonna lie.
Player thing, albeit in a different way to how bolted-on multiplayer hurt us in the past. Looking at you, Spec Ops: The Line, and I think you do just see, like, another echo or reverberation of an industry trend. And what that essentially means for these companies is something that is actually, in a way, quite sad for us. It does essentially mean that you can't just have a multiplayer suite of features. You have to have a full live service multiplayer experience. And to me, it is so disappointing, and it really just sucks that you can't just make an interesting multiplayer side game for your AAA game, throw it in there, and it could be something that, you know, people play for a few weeks, or just do with their friends. No. It cannot be that. It has to be a massive, recurring revenue, microtransaction-based live service. That's just
Yep, obviously.
it. But I suppose I then think about all of the arena shooter revivals that various companies have tried to make happen. You know, thinking about shooters that aren't the big ones that everybody knows about. There are riches in the niches, as they say, you know, if you say go into the milsim genre or whatever, but it does seem that that diversity of experience that comes from just, hey, let's do a multiplayer mode if it makes sense, it does seem that's going away. Because I suppose realistically, as players, we've been trained that you don't really play a multiplayer game just for fun. You also play it for mastery. You play it for meaning. You play it for community. So it's as if games...
Well, that's not a new take. That's not even a hot take. We all know that this is true by default, yeah? Everyone who has played any game ever has at least once tried to be competitive and played rank. Hey, if you're playing rank and you're fine being bronze, silver, or whatever in any game that you're playing, that's fine. But you're still technically playing it for competitiveness sake, and every time you rank up, you're pretty happy about that. Unless you're a Magic player, in which case, the game's sad.
Games that aren't big enough, that don't have that critical mass of content and development pace to just, like, be an active, almost forever game that somebody could play for 1,000 hours. If it can be that, it just doesn't get made. And that's pretty much that. Of course, indies can step in here and fill the gap, but it is so very hard to do multiplayer on an indie scale, because, man, getting a lot of concurrent players without having an insane marketing budget or being a runaway sleeper hit, well, that's just damn hard. Now, if you zoom back and actually think about this, right? This is 9 years of development.
There are indies that do it, but that's mostly on accident. It is what it is.
a project that they're presenting as basically being not sustainable for long-term production. And in a way, it kind of means that something doesn't add up. There's a great developer, Brandon Sheffield, who pointed this out. He said, "I get this is a public-facing post, but Naughty Dog was working in a multiplayer game for 9 years and only just now realized they were going to have to commit their whole studio to making it live service. If that's true,
Yeah, that sounds so stupid. Yeah, again, the fact that they committed to that thing 10 years or 9 years or whatever, that completely changes it. My initial thoughts were, oh, they started making it probably on the concept level for like a year or two, flesh it out, and then they understood this is not going to work out. Giving them the benefit of the doubt, of course, but 10 years? Bruv.
Are making themselves sound incredibly foolish. Most folks working on the game must have known what an undertaking a live service game is because they had to be planning one. So, who is out there saying it will be fine without understanding it? That's going further up the chain. So it's the idea that somebody further up the chain basically can't use a bloody spreadsheet and didn't think about what they were truly asking Naughty Dog to pull off. And ultimately, this is the situation.
Impossible. That's flat out impossible.
We're left in. So that's it from a developer's perspective, thinking about this realistically.
I know people want to really think that, you know, the CEOs and all of the executive level people are really, really dumb. But the reality is they're, on average, at least 10 times smarter than anyone watching this. It's just true, okay? If they make a bad decision, you would have probably already burned the company down to the ground. It is what it is. There's a reason that big multi-billion-dollar company CEOs who literally crash and burn the company over the course period of 10 years are gonna get rehired than someone who has not even been a CEO ever. That's because they are better. I know it sounds counterintuitive even to a degree, but that is just the reality of life.
Ultimately, though, the management play that they have made is to focus this less on saying that they're cancelling a game and more on saying we are redoubling our efforts and completely focusing on single player and using that as a large marketing point, and that is a monumental shift. So, the perception of live service has basically shifted. As they said, we have two paths in front of us, solely live service game studio or continue to focus. And look at the wording there, quote, solely live service game studio versus single player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage. Look at the language, the wording there. That is not neutral language. It's not the sort of neutral language that would appear in a Sony financial report that maybe otherwise would have announced this. This is live service being framed as, basically they're saying, we either become just another bloody studio like all the rest of them making this tripe, or...
Don't believe it.
Or we continue to be what actually makes us us. So basically they're getting a little bit of kind of rallying around.
Also, I don't understand. Is Naughty Dog a separate entity or are they owned by Sony? Because he has said a couple of conflicting things. I understand they're owned by Sony pretty much at this point, or Sony sponsors them to make games for them? Which one is it? If Sony sponsors them to make games for them, that's okay, but that's the middle ground of what he's saying here. But is Naughty Dog a privately owned enterprise, or are they just a subsidiary of Sony at this point? It kind of matters a lot for this conversation, not gonna lie.
On their flag, their heritage. And then, of course, the kicker is, don't worry, they're already working on the next iteration
look at
of
that.
games.
It was everyone's favorite She-Hulk. Nice.
You love revealing that they've got...
If the Last of Us Part 3 is not exclusively about She-Hulk, I'm gonna be mad.
More games in development than the one that they've already discussed. So big picture, that's the play. They know what's going on, but there is a bit of a problem, and that just is that The Last of Us Factions was really fun. It was really good, and they've actually hidden replies, or, you know, they've stopped other people from replying to this post, which sometimes companies do if there's a little bit of drama, just as a kind of, like control measure or whatever. But big picture, though, there are plenty of people who are disappointed here because, actually, surprisingly, the gameplay of The Last of Us translated over into Factions like remarkably well. It was super fun and so many people loved it. And there absolutely could have been a, maybe small, but absolutely healthy, stable community here. But the point is, that just ain't enough. And the fact that just ain't enough is ultimately why, for many people, they can feel a little bit betrayed. by Naughty Dog right now. Even though obviously this is good news, because otherwise what would have happened, right, is that this Last of Us multiplayer game would have been a humongous thing. It would have had seasons. Maybe there would be a narrative woven through that.
It would have a battle pass and skins and a special currency that you transform into real money and stuff like that. Yeah, probably.
At the very least, how would you make money from it? Well, you're probably going to need to have mountains of developers making mountains of skins. And then, how do you even deal with that? I mean, you could say, and hey, I can give bad, horrible ideas because the game's dead now, and a little bit inspired by hyenas, actually. But The Last of Us happens in the future, our future, which of course is a future where all of our current brands still exist. So if you want to do a Goku or a John Wick, you actually can do that in The Last of Us. You know, you just have to make it be a sort of aged relic. And I suppose that's the way that they probably would have had to have went. So at least in this way, we don't get to live in that hell. And
yeah, I don't even... Huh?
and the main takeaway here is that a big studio was able to say, live service bad, in relation to cancelling their own live service. I mean, they didn't say live service bad, but look at the framing. It's, you know, we either continue to be the thing that you love, or we become just like another studio. You know, it's kind of got a bad connotation to it. So, big picture then, this is good. Millions of people, millions and millions of people will see this. Suits will see this, and maybe small moves like this, in addition to, say, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
I don't know, we can be pretty hopeful about this if we want to, but I would not place all my eggs in one basket about this. I don't think it's obviously going to change anything if we're being completely real. Anyway, that was Billiard News. Pretty good stuff. Anyway, this was Quizzer Sid saying thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.